welcome us all to this very important occasion, which is a hard work of research and excellence. Me and Jude, we have come a long way. Jude has been one of the pillars of our work here at the National Human Rights Commission. When we started this process about 8 years ago, when I came to this commission as the secretary, I'm still the first staff of the commission that became the executive secretary of the commission. And I talked to Jude and with a couple of my friends, and we agreed that the starting point was to have a strategic work plan. And I can tell you that after putting that strategic work plan in place, it has guided most of the things we have done. The modest achievements we have made have been built on that strategic work plan. So once more, I welcome you to the launch of this book, and I know it's going to be successful. Thank you very much.
I'm very excited to chair this occasion because of many, many reasons. One reason is just because we need the Nigeria, the African story to be told by Nigerians and by Africans. We read all kinds of books, all kinds of materials that are published about us, but we can hardly find our voice in those kind of conversations. So when Jude came and said that you want to start this series, I said yes, we need that one. Because as you know, there are many people who come to this continent, stay for 1 week, go back and write a whole series of books about us. And I think that to get someone here with us to write what he's writing is something which is very commendable, something that we should encourage, and we make sure that it happens. The second reason is primarily because of the subject matter itself, about civil society. It's a subject that comes very close to my heart, but a subject also that I think we need to say more and more about it. Because in this country, for sure, when you talk about civil society, the only people will be thinking about is people like that comes and harass Tony about human rights violation, which is good. But there are a series of civil society groups and organizations in this country, across the continent, who are doing all kinds of wonderful things that we really never talk about that one. The third reason is that I think we should celebrate civil society groups in this country. Why is that? Because one is that if you look at the number of our young people in this place who have become international, who have established international civil society organizations. So you know, when people talk about innovation, creativity, and others, people think about fintech, people think about digital skills and other things. But here we are in this country, you know, Budget, for example, has an office in Washington. Follow Your Money has an office in like 24 other countries. Live Africa has office in several parts of the world as well. So these are our young people who have also become very innovative, very effective in just not talking about civil society as just about Nigerian institutions, but they are really globalized Nigerian civil society groups and organizations, operating at the global level. So if, for example, you know, whether it's NDI or whatever group, or, okay, I can see we say this here. So whether it's Plan International or Kia International, why don't you have Nigeria, whether Live Africa Nigeria, in Washington, in New York, in all other places and others. So people like Useni can start working for imperialist organizations, and they can come and work for Nigerian organizations that are also operated internationally as well. I think that is very important innovation and work that people are doing, and I've been encouraging all our young people around that, especially like Budget, like Live Africa and others, that they should write and document their own experiences as well. But we should not allow these things just to go like that without telling their own stories about how they have become African organizations, how they become global organizations. The fourth is actually the subject of resilience, especially in this funding crisis that we have found ourselves. I think that this room is full of, I'm sure, full of stories about how many of our people we have lost as a result of the cut from USAID, or from DICT, or FCDO, or from GIZ, or from other private foundations. And this is a story that is told all over the place and other things. I think that we also have to think, okay, what can we do in this kind of context and situation? I think one of the themes about this work is around domestic philanthropy. How do we encourage our own philanthropic organizations to do what we are doing? So if the government of Netherlands give us money to do our work, why can't the Nigerian government give us money to give our own money as well? Or why can't we go to the rich people in Nigeria, whether it's Angote or whoever they are and others? Why don't we also look at process whereby we can be funded? The former chair of General Service is here, and she knows very well that in other parts of the world, the tax system is one of the ways in which they encourage domestic philanthropy and other things. So we have to be thinking about, and I remember Triple NGO and others, we worked very closely with them during the last review of the tax laws and said, look, let's try to put something in our own tax laws that will also encourage domestic philanthropy in this country, so that people who are donating for good cause can have some forms of tax exemption, just as it's been done in other parts of the world in order to encourage our own domestic philanthropy. So I'm very happy that Jude has taken these issues forward and bringing us together for these conversations. I know that we have a very strong set of panelists who I'm sure we're going to learn more from them and others. So I don't want to be accused of violating the human rights of the Executive Secretary of the Human Rights Control Commission. So we'll all go back and sit down after staying him for some period as well. But thank you very much for coming. Thank you.
I certainly am glad I'm still alive. I am very delighted to be able to present this keynote address at an event that really marks a milestone. One of the things that we frequently said over the course of advocacy on our continent is that we don't document enough. We don't document enough of the things that happen in our society because there is too much informalization of action and consequence and outcome. And so for you, Jude, I just had to find a place on my schedule to be able to come. I cherish you very much. I recall how it was that when I returned with the responsibility to carry, to do the Africa Economic Development Policy Initiative. I was meant to be based in New York after my time at the World Bank. I didn't want to stay abroad. That's why I was coming home. So I said I must do my time with the Open Society Foundation in New York, and said I would be in Nigeria, but I was part of the team in New York for the Africa Economic Development Policy Initiative. And who was it that had to make sure that I landed very well with my office set up and everything? It was Jude. It was Jude. So we took come a long way from today. I am just so happy to see this gathering because the conversation that I've been asked to lead off is a very important conversation. The conversation on the matter of resilience and sustainability of civil society on our continent. Well, I want to start into this speech by saying that we actually have come together at a time that the concept of resilience and sustainability are the issue. They are the issue. We are in a state of fragility where we need an anti-fragility strategy. And sustainability and resilience are the most effective anti-fragility strategies. Sustainability is the quiet calculus of a programming officer, either in Nairobi or in Abuja or in Kampala or Cape Town, deciding whether to help her staff or close the project. We're not here to theorize about resilience and sustainability. We're here to reckon with the fact that until we accept that the culture of civil society existed before the modern terminology of it amongst us. But we somehow abandoned that tradition of localizing the mobilization of thoughts toward issues of importance to our communities and embraced this idea of dependence that then made it difficult for us to build the sustainable institutions that our brother Jude is calling our attention to. So, the civil society sector in Africa is living through the most disruptive and funding shock in generations. Whether it's USA or it's TFIG, that's FCPO, again, or it is even the Nordic countries that were very strong supporters of civil society on our continent. The financing has almost meant the absence of financing, has almost meant the weakening of the very important tradition of having voices of society and gatherings of people who have an idea of how society should work. So, dear brothers and sisters, it has been a cliff. Hundreds of organizations across our continent have shut programs, retrenched staff, and in far too many cases, closed their doors permanently. Like, literally just vanished. How is this acceptable? The European donors also have not been able to absorb the shock that their brother Trump has shocked their systems. Because it's a shock to everyone what has happened. The Gulf and Asian philanthropies that some of the people were hoping would step in have not filled the gap. And the truth is that people are calling this a storm. But you know, storms don't end when people are merely observing them. They carry away much more important things than we could ordinarily imagine. Well, this funding issue is shifting. The political ground has shifted even more, such that more than half of African states now have operating environments for civil society that is rated as repressive and obstructive. So the idea that it is money that is the greatest impediment to civil society on our continent is a fallacy. It is the fact that we now have governments that have scant regard for what civil society role is in the democratic and governance processes. Ladies and gentlemen, I have come with some pillars that I think would enable us understand what Jude is getting us through this primer to consider. And I'll go to them. The first thing that I want to say is that the primary role of civil society must constantly guide us. Civil society is not private sector. Does everybody understand that? I said civil society is not private sector. Can I get a yes? Yes. It's not private sector. Civil society is not public sector. Civil society has its own role, not out for it. Civil society role is to hold the state accountable. Civil society role is to organize citizens around their own interests. Civil society role is to challenge the The role of civil society cannot be performed by institutions whose existence depend on the goodwill of foreign treasuries. Ladies and gentlemen, the moment our funding source can collapse our organizations, our funding source has become our master, regardless of whether they ever issue on instruction. The agency issue is the core of sustainability, dear children. The agency issue. This is the greatest divide, the gap between African societies' formal sovereignty and our actual capacity to alter our own development trajectory. People think that civil society is a flippant kind of thing. It's something that just happens by and by. No, civil society is the soul of the definition of the vision, of the aspiration, of the shared values, and of course the identity of any society in which they exist. Civil society is the heart of the sovereignty of the people. Ladies and gentlemen, the contradiction of us thinking of self-determination and then having civil society that is not regarded as the heart of the matter is one that this book seeks to challenge. And for that, I thank you, Jude. The heart of development is dignity. And the most significant sector of society that assures dignity. So the dignity of a society is actually contained in the way that a civil society is organized. So what we've come today is not just because Jude wrote a book, we're here to talk about it. This could be a defining moment from how our society is organized. Ladies and gentlemen, it cannot be the case that the conversation we have about resilience and sustainability is lowered to the least common denominator. No, it must be elevated from a sector survival conversation to an African self-determination conversation. So, what are my 5 pillars of what must change? Number 1 is that I believe indigenous financing must move from aspiration to architecture. In effect, I'm saying don't even start a civil society until you have a financing architecture that is indigenous and that can self-sustain. Keep it at whatever scale that indigenous financing architecture can carry. That's a critical pillar. The domestic capital that is not tainted by all kinds of shenanigans. The last thing you want to do is to take money from those who have looted the treasury and we say we want to use it for civil society. My father would say that he said you don't eat snail, but you told those who are eating it to bring it so you can use your teeth to cut it up for them, to divide it. Let me help you divide it. No, that's not the kind of indigenous architecture we're asking for. Ladies and gentlemen, what this means is that for us, over the 2 decades that we have been talking about diversifying our funding base and not done so, the imperative for that to happen now is beyond any words can convey. Every serious African civil society organization should now build within the next 3 to 5 years a financing strategy in which African sources, African philanthropy, and I've recently been calling them out, Because you can't have a situation where USA closes, FCDO closes, and other Nordic countries close reduce their commitment. And then all we're doing is crying. We're crying. Where's the dignity? Civil society must restore the dignity of Africa by saying that we're going to call out our own local philanthropies. We need to work with them. We need to do the things that are necessary for domestic mobilization. African philanthropy, earned income, social enterprise, faith-based giving, diaspora contribution, all of these are sources that will help us design architecture, not just mere aspiration. Because, ladies and gentlemen, this whole idea of resilience and sustainability of society, of civil society, is a design issue. It's a design issue. We designed within a context that enabled the African civil society to remain the small organizations that we've been. It is time to get back to the design table and to say that after many decades of running this model, it has expired. There is a new model to be designed. And in the case of Nigeria, all those who should be at the table of the design of the resilient and sustainable Nigerian civil society are in this role. I've just given you a homework.
Development landscape presents profound challenges for civil society organizations. Across the continent, organizations working on democracy, governance, accountability, gender justice, public finance management, human rights, poverty eradication, and citizen participation are confronted with shrinking civic space, declining donor support, weak institutional systems, rising authoritarian tendencies, and decreasing public distrust. In many African countries, including Nigeria, CSOs remain indispensable actors in deepening democracy, advocating for social justice, providing humanitarian services, and amplifying the voices of the poor and excluded. Yet, paradoxically, many of these organizations struggle with sustainability, governance weaknesses, poor succession planning, donor dependency, institutional fragility, and leadership crisis. It is within this broader context that building on solid ground, primer on resilience and sustainability of CSOs in Africa by Jude emerges as a timely and significant intervention. The book is a practical, reflective, and analytically rich contribution to the discourse on civil society resilience and institutional sustainability in Africa. Published in 2026 by Premium Times Book, the work, made up of 234 pages, draws from extensive practitioner experience, research, and institutional engagement across the African civic space. In my own work, I have consistently emphasized leadership, institution building, governance reform, strategic thinking, accountability, and transformational development. This is why the subject matter of this book is, for me, both urgent and foundational. I have repeatedly argued that Africa's development crisis is fundamentally linked to the crisis of leadership, poor strategies, weak institutions, and failure of governance systems. This aligns closely with the central thesis of Udo's book, namely that CSOs must move from personality-driven activism to system-driven institutional sustainability. The issue of sustainability of CSOs in Africa has become increasingly critical in the last 3 decades. Historically, many African CSOs emerged in response to governance failures, military authoritarianism, economic crisis, human rights abuses, social injustice, and developmental deficits. Particularly in Nigeria, civil society played a central role in resisting military dictatorship, promoting democratic transition, advocating constitutional and electoral reform, defending human rights, and deepening citizen participation. In addition, there are many issues which are necessary for peace, order, harmony, and development of society, championed by CSOs in Nigeria to the exclusion of government and private sector, such as gender equality, rights of persons with disability, environmental conservation, respect for human rights and dignity of the human person, harmful traditional practices, and gender-based violence. These issues, the 2 other sectors in society, government and private sector, are not interested in these issues. However, despite their historic contributions, many African CSOs remain structurally weak. A significant number depend excessively on foreign donor funding, operate with fragile governance systems, lack succession plans, and are often centered around founders than their institutions. ILO recognizes these challenges clearly when it notes that many organizations struggle once donor funding ends, and that sustainability must go beyond financial resources to include strategic planning, governance integrity, organizational health, network, and operational credibility. The broader African context further reinforces the relevance of this subject. Across many countries, civic space is shrinking due to restrictive laws, harassment of activists, state surveillance, which Madam Obi talked about earlier, and political intolerance. Simultaneously, international donor priorities are shifting, creating severe financial uncertainty for CSOs. These realities have exposed the fragility of many civil society institutions. It is therefore significant that Jude ILO does not treat sustainability merely as a financial issue. Rather, he frames it as an institutional challenge involving governance systems, strategic vision, leadership culture, accountability mechanisms, innovation, talent development, and community legitimacy. This multidimensional understanding of sustainability represents one of the greatest strengths of the book. Now to overview and structure of the book. The book is organized into 5 thematic sections dealing with strategy development, institutional governance, talent development, fundraising, and visibility/networking. Through these themes, the author presents a compelling roadmap for building enduring institutions capable of surviving beyond donor circles, charismatic founders, and changing political contexts. This structure reflects a holistic understanding of organizational sustainability. Rather than isolating fundraising as the sole determinant of survival, ILO presents sustainability as multidimensional, encompassing strategic direction, institutional culture, leadership systems, governance frameworks, organizational learning, and public legitimacy. The major sections are: 1, designing and following your North Star, strategy development and implementation. 2, a rule-based order, institutional governance. 3, tending the plans, talent management and leadership development. 4, hatching your chicks, fundraising and resource mobilization. And 5, standing out in the park, visibility and networking. This sequencing is deliberate and analytically significant. The author places strategy and governance before fundraising, thereby rejecting the common misconception that donor funding alone guarantees organizational sustainability. Now to the main issue, review of the book. One of the strongest features of building on solid ground is its practical orientation. Unlike many academic texts that remain highly theoretical, the book combines conceptual clarity with practical insights drawn from lived experience within the African civic space. The author's experience in organizations such as the Open Society Foundations, OSF, Forum of Federations, and other civic institutions give the work unusual depth and authenticity. The book opens with a powerful reflection on why organizations should exist in the first place. ILO strongly criticizes the tendency of some individuals to establish NGOs primarily for financial gain rather than service to humanity. He insists that the legitimate basis for funding a CSO must be commitment to a cause bigger than oneself. This moral framing is extremely important in the Nigerian context, where the proliferation of briefcase NGOs, political NGOs, and the phenomenon of non-governmental individuals have undermined public trust in civil society. To me, one of the greatest challenges is these political NGOs. They have not organized any single program since they were formed. But once one politician has a problem, they will organize press conference. And all the press houses will be present. And they will say they are civil society coalition. And this is the picture that many people have of civil society. Fraudulent people just posing for politicians. One of the strongest arguments advanced in the book is the indispensable role of CSOs in African development and democratic governance. ILO describes CSOs as the conscience of nations and often the only independent voices calling governments to order. This framing situates civil society within democratic theory as an intermediary institution that bridges citizens and the state. The book aligns with the works of Alexis Tokwe, Robert Putman, and contemporary African governance scholars who see civic associations as essential for democratic participation, accountability, and social capital formation. The author further argues that organizations should emerge to fill genuine gaps within society rather than merely duplicate existing interventions. The examples of Invictus Africa, Deaf Zimbabwe Trust, and CFK Africa effectively demonstrate how impactful organizations are often born from clear problem identification and community-centered innovation. The section on strategy development is one of the most intellectually robust parts of the book. ILO conceptualizes strategy as an organization's North Star, providing direction, focus, and coherence. This conceptualization resonates strongly with my own perspective on strategic leadership and organizational transformation. I have consistently argued that organizations without clear vision and strategic direction become reactive, inconsistent, and unsustainable. The book correctly identifies strategy as fundamentally about making choices. Many African NGOs, driven by funding pressures, often attempt to work on every issue simultaneously, thereby weakening their effectiveness and institutional identity. ILO warns against this tendency and emphasizes the importance of niche development, contextual analysis, clarity of mission, and innovation. Its central message that institutions must outlive personalities is especially relevant for Nigeria and the broader African continent. In my view, the book reinforces the critical importance of institution building, strategic leadership, governance reform, and transformational civic engagement. It aligns closely with the long-standing argument that Africa's future depends on building strong institutions rooted in integrity, accountability, and citizen-centered leadership. This book should therefore be widely read by civil society leaders, development partners, donor agencies, governance scholars, universities, leadership institutes, and public policy actors across Africa. It deserves to be a foundational test for conversations on civic resilience, institutional sustainability, and democratic transformation in Africa. Thank you for listening.
Now to the book on gaming, and I'll welcome Dr. Shetima to do the honors, and I'm sure he will have others join him. Keep up with a round of applause, please.
Thank you, Angela. I would like to invite few people to join us. Of course, the keynote speaker. Okay, just two of you here. Come on. I think the last point that our keynote speaker said was around digital sovereignty. And here we are at the National Human Rights Commission. I think that AI is controlled by 5 companies in the world, all of them somewhere around Silicon Valley and other places. Those 5 companies that control AI are determining everything that I do, even in my own village. We have our own National Human Rights Commission. I'm sure you have followed some of the cases that are coming up in California and other places. In fact, one of the most interesting cases was the one in Victoria, Canada, where someone went to court and said that that P3 was aware that their son was looking for guns and they were never informed. And instead of going to court in Canada, they decided to go to court in California. Here in our country, we have a bill. I don't know why they call it NAIRA, but it's supposed to be the National Artificial Intelligence Regulatory Agency. I'm sure that most Nigerians are not aware of what is happening there. I think it's very important for us to pay a lot of attention to what is happening. The EU has probably the best act in the world that developed a framework. There are so many lessons that we can learn from the EU Act. I'm saying that because there's the National Human Rights Commission here also. Because I think our National Human Rights Commission has to be there to protect our own rights as citizens of this country. So on this note of propaganda, I'm happy to say that we're here to present this wonderful publication by our friend, our colleague, our mentor, and he also has so many mentees here as well. This wonderful book titled Building on Solid Ground, Primer on Resilience and Sustainability of CSOs in Africa. Let's write the book for humanity, for the service of civil society groups in this country. Thank you very much. Although Angela has not told me, what I want to do is to ask the panelists to stay so they don't have to go back and come back. Let's have the panel conversation now so that we can expedite the process as well. Congratulations. Oh, you need your chairs and others. Okay.
Thank you. So first I'll invite Ambassador Ben, who is the ambassador of the Kingdom of the Netherlands to Nigeria. Please join us first. And already on stage we have Dr. Jude. He is the country director of CARE Nigeria, an international humanitarian and development organization. Then, of course, we have with us the Deputy High Commissioner, the British Deputy High Commissioner to Nigeria, Jude, who is here with us today. Please, a huge round of applause for her and to join us on stage. Rounding out the group is none other than Kenny Okeyedu, who is the Executive Director of Partners West Africa Nigeria, where to these programs focus on security governance, justice reform, and citizen engagement. And I will be your moderator for the conversation. Thank you, everyone. Challenges. And I must say thank you again for being here. Thank you for lending your voice to this event and to the conversation. It's very important. You're all bringing in a wealth of experience and knowledge and expertise, and it's an honor to have you here. So we'll just start off, I would say, simple. Let's start off with the book in the sense that if you've had an opportunity to read the book, or perhaps from the review that Dr. Otibi gave so skillfully earlier, which part of the book would you say you believe should be the greatest takeaway for everyone here in the room? I think it's a general question, so whoever feels most ready might quickly. You do seem ready.
Okay, thank you very much. I think for me, I've been privileged to have read the book, and I read the entire book. So I'm not speaking from Otibe's review, as brilliant as the review may be, but I'm speaking from my privileged position of someone who has read it. And I think I found the strategic planning and visioning as a very important segment of the book. And the second one is governance. And I speak to that because I work very closely with national organizations. And I also had a very strong national organizational background. And I have been, like Dr. was mentioned earlier, been part of this struggle, and we have seen different generations of organizations. And I believe strongly that those are the two major missing links. That one, visioning and visioning appropriately. To vision to suit your context. And that little niche, that little add-on, because we are not bringing anything extraordinary, anything new, different people are doing different things. What are those gaps that you have found, that you are actually trying to fill? And how do you strategically design yourself to reflect and project those gaps? Because that in particular defines every other thing you do, whether systems in terms of institutional arrangement and management or resource mobilization or whatever. It depends on that strategic issue that you have defined for yourself. The second is governance. It's also another missing link in our system, we sometimes assume that the integrity or the background or the history of the founder is enough to sustain the organization. But we know also, for some of us in this work, that no matter how much you are, how much discipline you are, unless you are able to institutionalize that discipline, you are not able to run a system. And that is where governance matters a lot. The nature of your board. And Jude went to the details of the board. He wasn't just talking about board, but he was talking about the diversity of the board, how to select them, how to manage them. Because many times we have board, but the board can also become unaccountable. That nobody is asking them questions and they don't review themselves. And so these are very, very important, and thank you very much for that.
Yeah. I think I saw two levels in this book, which I read almost to the end, I must say. One level is the why question. Why do you want to do this? And Udo gives a very clear instruction there, and it is, if you're in it for the money, forget about it. You need to have passion, you need to have a vision, you need to know why you're doing this. You need to have a lot of integrity and a sense of purpose. And that's a very important message. If you don't have that, and if you don't understand that you're opposing I will say, an alternative to the other forces, private sector, public sector, then you shouldn't do it. And that is extremely important. You must be faithful to those commitments. That is one. The other level is, how do you organize yourselves? And I understand that in this context, to teach people or to tell them, there are certain basic rules that you must adhere to enhance your credibility, not only towards yourself, but towards anyone else who holds you under scrutiny. Very, very helpful.
Give you a round of applause. Thank you. I agree with everything that has been said. I've also read the book. The other element for me, governance is very key for me. And then the strategic planning process. Because I learned early that if you do not plan and you do not have a roadmap to where you're going, then you might not be going anywhere. And I say that from the point of view of the fact that I didn't join civil society from activism. I joined from the lens of trying to build a career and wanting to do something different with my law degree. So I didn't come from student union background, right? So that's it. The other element is the branding. The branding is, how do people see you? And how do you brand yourself? Which speaks closely to, how do you tell your story? How do you package the work you are doing in such a way that when your intervention is seen anywhere, it is clear that this must be P1, right? If your product, your reports are seen, the analysis of your policy brief is read, it automatically, you know that this is it. Because when you see Coke, you know this is Coca-Cola, right? And that's the lens, I believe, as civil society organizations we should bring to this. Then finally, the tension between program and finance, I found that very interesting, because I see it every day. Colleagues have gone into the field. They've gone into Yobe, right? And they're implementing projects in Yobe. We have a project from FCDO, because Gil is sitting beside me, and then the procurement procedures clearly laid out. Who in Yobe is going to give you a receipt for a bike, right? Which caterer are you going to get in Yobe that you'll be able to go through three quotations, right? And then we have those some things are just next to being impossible. So when colleagues come back, I see the tension, and I'm constantly trying to navigate that tension.
And finance is breathing down my neck and is telling me, ma, when the donors come for audit, you need to be able to show your books clearly. They're not going to ask you to speak grammar. If NIRS, and now National Road Finance, FIRS, if FIRS comes for audit, you must be able to show your books. We're not going to be able to speak grammar. So I see that that tension was real, and it's still real. We're still grappling with it, and I hope we'll find a way out of it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think a lot of us can connect. When she talked about the tension between programs and finance, it's something a lot of us have experienced. Yes, please.
So just very briefly, I don't have a specific chapter, but I liked your challenge, Jude, about international partners to stop mistaking passion for sustainability and to start investing seriously in institutions that can outlive their projects and their founders and their funding cycles. And it occurred to me that many CSOs, many NGOs suffer from something that's well known called founder dependency. And I've worked for NGOs, I have done some work in the voluntary sector where this is the case. You know, where an organisation's credibility and its decision-making and its donor relationships all rest in one person, and that is just not sustainable. So that really important point about succession planning, recruiting the right people and having the right systems, having a board that makes decisions, and not having everything vested in one person, because that's so obviously not sustainable.
Thank you so much. And on that note, I want to thank all my distinguished panelists. Thank you to the audience for engaging meaningfully. And that brings us to a close. I think we'll just stay for a picture. You can stay back for the vote of thanks to the Jude leader. Thank you.
I left law school in 2003. After I left law school in 2003, and I remember vividly, 3 weeks after my final exam in law school, I was invited for a meeting with Odisa Wakoba. I went for that meeting, and we just chatted about a couple of things. He asked me what I wanted to do. I said, I was just thinking about it. He asked me when our result was going to come out. I said, in a couple of months. And he said to me, I want you to come and work for me. I start with this story because that meeting, that conversation, changed the trajectory of my life. I didn't have a CV, honest to God. There was no CV, I had no CV. But that conversation went well. He saw something and he offered me a job. The second incident was the first day I came to work. Now, on my interview day, I came with a tan suit. And if you know lawyers in Nigeria, that was a mortal sin. So on my first day of work, I made sure I had something dark. And they asked me to come into the office again. And it was right after the Electoral Act was passed in 2003. And he asked me, what are your thoughts about this law? I had very strong opinion. I felt it was unconstitutional. So I went on and on and on and on and on, telling him what I thought about the law. And he said to me, go write it down. We need to publish it. That was how, on my first day on the job, I wrote an op-ed that was then put as a feature on this day law page. For lawyers, that is one of those places you want to be at. And I was there without being called to the Nigerian bar. Simply because somebody was an extraordinary mentor. And as they say, the rest is history. 23 years down the line, I'm standing here. Now, the reason I started with this story is there's a lot of talk about talent management. And I wanted to start from there. That opportunity and that leadership I got, it gave me confidence. It made me feel like I could do anything. And it made me ambitious. I wasn't okay with just sitting there being a project officer. I wanted to be more. And I was given the space to grow. Of course, there's no perfect organization. But when it came to intellectual space, I got that. And I've been very fortunate that all of the organizations I've worked with gave me that space. But it was not just the organization. Looking at the people in this room is a continuation of that support system. That talent management, that mentoring support that has helped me grow in this sector. And so, this whole support system, this whole talent management, this whole solidarity, I think, is the biggest asset that we can give those who are coming after us. And we need to tell the story of how others helped us. A lot. And part of the reason of doing the primer is my way of paying it forward. Because there's been a lot of things I've seen, running a foundation in Nigeria, running an international organization in the Netherlands, reading books, interacting with people, helping to found organizations, and supporting organizations. There are very common trends, and I leave you with three. One trend that I know that makes almost every organization successful is when you treat your staff right. It doesn't matter about how profound your ambition is or how smart you are. If you don't treat your staff right, your organization will fail completely. The second thing is that you have to be innovative. You cannot answer the old question with the old answer that was wrong. And for every organization where I've seen that innovation, it's always worked. And the third thing is about working with others. No person can do it by him or herself. And in fact, if I don't talk about my village, it won't be complete, so I'm sorry. So in my village, they say that if you bury yourself, one hand will be outside. So you cannot complete that task without the help of others. And the philosophy of Africa is communalism. It's communalism. There is no proverb in my town where I come from that is just about the person. And I challenge anybody here who is from the southeast of Nigeria to give me one Igbo proverb that's about one person. That's not. Exactly. It's because we are intrinsically joined. Our humanity is fused together. And that also simply means that we can't work in isolation. We can't work by ourselves. The story of the broom is always the story. Taken apart, they break. Taken together, it cannot break. And my hope is that this book contributes to the fact that we cannot be broken because we are together. I thank you for coming here today, in spite of everything you're supposed to be doing. I urge you to please help get this book as far as possible. We will do our best. There's a podcast on it. It will be free to air. People can just listen to it. We will make sure as much as possible to be present in places where we're invited to talk about the book. Because the only way we can get out of this mess, which is a big mess, is when we come together and say enough is enough. Thank you very much.